If a friend tells you they went out to get some coffee, is that a story? Like, does that constitute a story? What does a story have to be considered one? What actually is a story, after all? I know the question sounds absurd, but water gun to your head, can you explain what a story actually is? Can you? Really? So here's why I'm asking. As of this year of 2026, it's been exactly 10 years since I've started teaching other people how to create characters and tell stories. And the reason I can do this so well is because earlier, I couldn't write a story to save my life. So when I teach you how to do it, my secret is that I remember exactly how I felt when I couldn't write anything. I felt my problem was that I'd get writer's block, but the truth is that I didn't really understand what a story was made of or how they function. How can I explain this to you? It took me forever to realize that there was a reason why the people in The Lord of the Rings went from one place to the next. I feel like this doesn't even make sense when I say it. Like, in The Lord of the Rings, the characters leave the Shire and walk to Mount Doom to destroy a ring, right? So I thought it was like a road movie, where the characters go from point A to point B and have some encounters along the way where exciting things can happen. Well, as a professional educator, let me tell you this. It f***ing isn't. They eventually reach point B, but the whole story is about how something ruins their plans and they have to be constantly changing how they are getting there. They're going in one direction, something bad happens, so they have to change routes, and this cycle repeats until they get where they were going. You may know this by just watching the movie and following what's going on, but I'm sure I have a diagnostic pending to explain why I just couldn't pay attention enough to retain critical information about the stuff I was watching. So for me, stories were a bunch of cool scenes strung together. That was my best way of explaining what a story was. And in a way, isn't that what they are? Well, yes. Therefore, my understanding was that you could put the most disconnected things together and they would make up a story. For example, when Pulp Fiction came out, people freaked out about how amazing it was. And how did the movie convince us of that? Well, with two guys talking about foot massage, pointing weapons at some strangers in a crummy apartment, and finally opening a briefcase containing something we're not allowed to see. So, a random conversation, plus a bungled shootout, plus something, and we were like, wow, this is genius! Like, can you see how my understanding of what a story was didn't feel exactly off? The thing is, for people who can actually pay attention, stories have to make a little more sense and connect those pieces in a much more structured way than I could understand them. But since I couldn't understand it, stories just felt like a nice collage. As far as the thing I threw there felt right, the overall result would be great, maybe even genius. Let me know in the comments if any of this sounds familiar. I would come up with a general idea for a story, often more a feel or an aesthetic or a straight up ripoff rather than an actual concept. Then I would imagine what the characters would be like and how they would interact, and that was pretty much it. Now I just have to figure out the things they will do and come up with cool lines for them to say. So the result was just a mumbled mess of people trying to act cool with no discerning plot, not really clear about what they're doing in the story, nor any semblance of a conclusion to wrap things up. The story just kinda ends on someone saying something funny. It wasn't exactly awful, like there was something there, but it sure wasn't good. So what was I missing? Why didn't my stories click? What should I do differently? If my stories weren't pulling it off, what did they need to be better? What makes a good story? What stories actually are? Well, thankfully, I studied and practiced and published in so many different formats, mediums, and disciplines that now I can confidently tell you all about it. Hey there, to help you with your ideas and your stories, I made this file with 10 simple steps called the Story Starter. It's what I use whenever I have a project that has a narrative in it. With the Story Starter, you can take a random idea and develop it into a workable project that you can pitch, sell, present to a team, or whatever you feel like doing. In it, you will find a lesson explaining how to use it and a Notion template where you can easily fill all the steps. Hit the link in the description or scan this QR code right here and off we go. So, if a story is not a random assortment of scenes put together, What are they? What constitutes a story, and most importantly, what doesn't? What do we need in it so that by the end we don't feel like there's something lacking here but I'm not exactly sure what it is? Let's start with the basics. What do all stories need to begin with? If you answered conflict, you are onto something. Have you been studying? Like, that's an answer of someone who has already read a book or two. Unfortunately, although you're not wrong, you're not exactly right. In order to have conflict, you need something to be in conflict, and the ones in conflict in a story are the characters. So before we have conflict, we first need someone to cause it. Therefore, I would say that character is first in any story and conflict is second. But when we say every story needs conflict, what we mean is something's gotta happen in that story. Wait, did you catch that? You have just been misled. Did you notice? When I say you need conflict and tell you that conflict means that something has to happen, I have already screwed your understanding of what a story is, because something can be anything, but conflict entails a very specific dynamic of some things. So conflict for us here means the encounter of two opposing forces. And when that happens, it means we have three things. One, those forces came from somewhere. Two, something set them into motion. And three, there's gonna be an outcome. Their encounter is gonna change each other's trajectory, meaning they came from somewhere, crashed into each other, and we will see what happened to them next. This last part is fundamental to the story. It's the result, the resolution, the end. And the ending is everything. The premise, the concept, the movie trailer is what pulls people into the story, what grabs their attention. But if you invite them into a party, now you gotta deliver one. And what truly delivers in a story is the ending. I remember learning this from Robert McKee's story. When you make a movie, if people decide to see it, what's happening is that they're gambling their time on Earth. They have accepted that they're gonna waste precious hours of their lives to see what you did. Whatever you're trying to do, whatever you're promising with your story, you gotta deliver. So you cannot afford to be uninteresting. And how do you achieve that? How do you tell a story in a way that keeps people interested? Well, if you've been paying attention, we kind of already went through it. Let me show you. If conflict, the encounter of opposite forces, is the center of your story, the thing the story will revolve around, let's take a look at the elements surrounding it. As we said, these forces represent the characters, the agents in the narrative. One of them is your protagonist, and something has set them into motion. That's what we call their motivation. They want something, and they're going after it. Your protagonist is at point A, and whatever it is they want, that's in point B. So they must traverse this metaphorical distance in order to get it. But the problem with getting things is that they're not always easy to get. So your protagonist is gonna face the obstacles that stand between them and their goal. When I talk about distance and obstacles, you might think of travel and enemies, but that's right only if it fits your story. The distance between a character and their goal can be as long as the space between trenches under heavy fire, or as short as the line between someone's bed and their closet when they want to start the day in the morning. And the obstacles in like a battlefield are fitting if your story asks for it. But if not, a splitting headache from a heavy hangover can be just as hard to face. So, when characters try to achieve their goals, fighting the obstacles in the way, we got our conflict. But the thing about those is that in a story, they must resolve. In stories, we are pitching forces against each other, which can be really interesting. But in order to reward the audiences for paying attention, we must resolve the conflicts we set up. So then, what we've got so far is this. A character has a goal, sets out to get it, meets an opposing force, thus entering a conflict that, in some definitive way, will resolve by the end of the story, telling us if the character got what they wanted or not. These are the bare bones ingredients of a story. There's nothing about random conversations, about looking cool, about what song's gonna play in the background, or what the cover has to look like, or how many fight scenes, kisses, dance numbers, or car chases you gotta have in it. So to make things very simple, take note, because this is gonna be on the test. Stories are about a character wanting something they don't have, going after it to try and get it, not being able to acquire it because of numerous obstacles, fighting those to the best of their ability, and eventually reaching an outcome that may be either positive or negative, depending on the writer's whim and the story's internal logic and progression. That is a bit long to remember. So let's simplify that. Stories are about someone wanting something and entering a conflict because of it, that eventually reaches a resolution. Like, the whole conflict part is most of the story, to be honest, and what it really represents is how hard it is for the character to get what they want. We could actually just scratch that whole session and say, stories are about someone wanting something and not getting it. And that's pretty much it. Like, we can even skip the whole ending part and leave everything hanging, like beyond the veil, shrouded in mystery. Because the important part is the premise, the idea of how things will unfold. Stories are about someone wanting something and not getting it. A sentence that leaves a void so intense that it can only be filled with one question. And then what happened? Because that's what you want. Stories are about digging into people's expectations of exciting things to come. And that attention, that question, the moment where people are suspended in time waiting for the outcomes of your premise to drop on them like the cherry on top of a sundae. Is any of this still making sense? That expectation is everything you can hope for. And the only thing you have to do when you get it is to fulfill it with a satisfying and interesting ending. Because that's the only reward fitting for the time people spent listening to what you had to say. To not be bored. Whatever terminology we use to explain the mechanics behind the stories we tell, one thing is key. Stories can't be boring. They can't be bland. They have to keep people watching, reading, listening. They have to keep people in. Otherwise, it's not a story. It's just data. Imagine a friend is telling you about what they did yesterday. They say they went out for some coffee. What do you reply? You say, and then what happened? You see, this question is everything. It means you have engaged an audience. They have deployed the most boring, unpromising, uninteresting premise, and yet, if they felt like volunteering this information, it must mean this is going somewhere interesting. It may have started out bland, but to justify its telling, this must be a worthy story. Your friend has bet a chip. On their side, they're betting that you will want to hear what they have to say. So if you do, if you believe that this may be worth your time, you place your chip, a chip that says, go on, I'm listening, you've got my attention. I'm curious about what's gonna happen in that so far deeply uninteresting story you seem to have started. A chip that says, and then what happened? This question is the most important thing ever whispered in storytelling history. It's the foundation of the relationship between those who write and those who read, those who tell and those who listen. If a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to ask, and then what happened, does it make a sound? No, it absolutely doesn't. Because if no one's watching, there might as well be no story. So there's a million ways to desperately grab people's attention, but once you've got it, you have to make it worth it to them. You have to deliver. So once your friend says, I went out to get some coffee, and you oblige by saying, and then what happened, they better come back with something, because now you're listening. If your friend tells you they went out for some coffee and they go, it was fine, it's like, cool story, bro. Now why did you waste my time on Earth with this? That's not a story. If things just happen according to plan, with no twists, no obstacles, no alarms and no surprises, then it's just data, just information. And stories are a way to deliver information with emotion. If you forget about the emotional part of it, might as well keep the story to yourself. Stories can look like a series of scenes strung up together, but they're actually a series of and then what happened? If your story is not rewarding your audience for paying attention, you might as well keep it to yourself. If you can't tell me about someone wanting something and not getting it, come back when you have something worth listening to. Now let's go write.